Hello, and welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. This is the preview for episode 52, Novel Utility. It's basically what it is it and what it is important and why it is actually what it is and why it is important now. Sorry, I'm a little bit late, kind of like lost track of time a little bit. Anyway, these are a series of ruminations that we give once a week, usually very early Sunday morning at 2 a.m. And basically, last week we had a very good talk about artifice and imitation. We're leading towards the idea of imagination and the idea of kind of like generating kind of like original and thoughtful and meaningful ideas. And basically, I kind of remember the piece that I kind of read a long time ago when I read The Origin of Species. I think I read The Origin of Species one summer. It was between my second or and third or third and fourth years of architectural school. Architectural school is 5 years. And I remember deciding it was one of those books that I just felt was important for an individual to read. So I remember reading Bearing on Natural Selection. And this is basically from the beginning of chapter 3, Struggle for Existence. And just going to give you a little bit of what I'm going to talk about more and more in depth. And Darwin says, I've called this principle by which each slight variation is useful is preserved by the name natural selection, in order to mark its relation to man's power of selection. But the expression, and that's important, to mark its relation to man's power of selection. But the expression often used by Mr. Herbert Spencer of the survival of the fittest is more accurate and is sometimes equally convenient. We have seen that man, by selection, can certainly produce great results and can adapt organic beings to his own uses through the accumulation of slight but useful variation given to him by the hand of nature. But natural selection, as we shall hereafter see, is a powerful, incessantly ready for action and is as immeasurably superior to man's feeble efforts as the works of nature are to those of art. So, as we take the weaker and feeble road of art, as opposed to the fact that we are the natural expression of humans' desire for art, how does that happen? We have our artificial selection, which is something that we use. But I think the reality is there is that consequence of what I would call novel utility. I feel as if architecture has stagnated, as of many of the arts and sciences. And I think one of the main concerns is that aside from the technical brilliance that exists, there isn't that innovation that basically puts us in a position where we move forward. Speaking with a lot of people recently, as I've been kind of thinking about this topic, and I think that a lot of people say that we have seen people who were original thinkers and basically could kind of have consequence in terms of original ideas. But you get the sense that a lot of people are happy and willing to kind of follow along and just basically develop the technique along the institutional lines that have been established. That has never been uh, it's never been a calling for me. It always seemed insincere, ingenuous, and cowardly. So one of the things that I think happens in organic design thinking is the possibility that this could basically be a way to which I could kind of correct that. So anyway, novel utility is that consequence to afford novel applications to action. And I think that that's something that kind of like is desperately needed in an architectural environment where formalities are incredibly static, incredibly stoic, and inertial. So that's the basic principle. So, Julie, do you have anything you want to kind of say as regards this idea?
What particularly?
You don't have to say anything. I mean, this is kind of more an idea that I've been working on, kind of like, as kind of a core of my own work. But I mean, it's like, so it may even be somewhat new to you. So it is kind of like that idea that, we have our conventions, and our conventions have never, have existed in a kind of like unquestioned. And I don't know if it's necessarily the fact that our conventions are terrible, or that we have lost the desire to challenge or kind of basically generate new ones.
Oh, yeah, sure. I have something to say.
Okay.
Yes. Evolution favors novel utility. That's what I have to say. And I'd be happy to expound on that if you'd like.
Yeah. I mean, we could work
Those traits
Mhm.
that are preferential, whether we're talking about arthropods, and I would say arthropods over mammals for the main reason that arthropods have much shorter lifespans in general, reproduce with much, much greater speed, and you can have generational arthropods producing aspects and behaviors of novel utility much faster than a mammalian species possibly could, which have, longer gestation times. And for those sorts of changes to be enacted intergenerationally would take a lot more time. And especially as you go down to single celled animals, if you go to in the plant world, the lichens and the hornworts and very ancient plant species, they also favor novel utility as a survival strategy.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think what I identify.
I don't know if that's your idea.
It's valuable. I mean, I think that I look at the fact that, like, novel or provocative is the idea that, like, rather than this thing proving itself by time. One of the things we read last week in Whitehead, and when he was talking about science and the century of genius, he talked about the fact that 17th century was able to overcome the metaphysical bias of the previous centuries, that though they had a rationalism, basically then could understand that rationalism basically manifests more successfully in the situation with an inductive method and experimentation. So one can use nature as that process. And we certainly do. We can use breeding as that process, and we can even use thinking at that process. So the novelty is basically that thing which basically kind of makes you think, is there consequence here? How that consequence bears out is different, is tried in different ways in different processes. So I'm trying to basically establish it as a process in architectural observation. So that's a preview, and that's we'll be speaking 2 a.m. Sunday morning, and that will be, what day is that? That is going to be the 23rd of November, coming up on the week before, actually, since it's Sunday, it's the week of Thanksgiving. So enjoy the holidays, everyone. And last word.
Yes. I believe there is a similar place for novel utility, especially where engineering intersects with architecture.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, and I think there was a premonition alluded to in the work of the late 20th century in America, and unfortunately, it was kind of disconnected. But now I think that there's certainly still some value left in the ideas that were laid out, and I believe that they are probably even maybe even more valuable, more necessary now. I think it's an idea to kind of like pick up on some of those things that were kind of like disregarded unfortunately and wrongly. So the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to the benefit of all for us to keep it this way. Thank you.
Thank you.